say hello formally to you all. I see a lot of friends of people that I miss bartending for. Some of my work colleagues are here as well. Thank you all for attending. And I've got some family and some neighbors in the group here too, which I first should say thank you to Sue, because this was originally, definitely the culmination of our year's worth of cocktail clubs via Zoom, which I've had a ton of fun with sharing, some recipes and some hidden tricks with you all at the University Club. And I thank you for allowing me to open it up to some friends and family, and just anything that can support our great local business over at the University Club of St. Paul and Solovino with Chuck Kansky. So a huge thank you to you both. And so let's get right into this. Let's first detail how we can use this little compendium that I created for today and for future use. So the first thing first is kind of to go over some supplies here. And I want to be very clear that as we've done this home bar kit throughout the spring and summer and fall, it's great to have a bartender's tools, and I can always respond with follow up on what companies and what makes and models I recommend. But it's very crucial to know that if you don't have a shaker, if you don't have a jigger, if you don't have a bartender's tool set, that is not entirely essential. Here's a few things that you can have at your home bar that certainly suffice to cut some corners. Number one, a mason jar. You've kind of got the built-in lid that you can actually screw on and shake, and then as well you can put it in a little half moon to kind of restrain the ice as you pour. And this is a totally viable home cocktail kit as well. But to go through just a little formal here today in terms of showing you the array of mixing equipment that you might consider as you get more and more serious into the cocktail room. Number one is the two-piece Boston shaker. These are metallic. These are what bartenders prefer to use. They have a smaller side and a larger side. Insert, slam shut, shake away, break, and pour. Okay. Another fancy and actually really helpful tip is that with the Boston shaker, you can utilize a tempered pint glass. It doesn't break and it fits and wedges in perfectly. And what is very nice there is if you're a visual person, if you retain things visually, you can always build the measurements of your ingredient in the clear side. So you can see the color, you can see the fill level as you go, and that kind of helps ingrain the measurements and the notions in your mind. Also, if you're making cocktails for two, you can usually shake up to two of an individual sized portion. That's perfect to kind of get an idea of your fill level before you add the ice, so you can kind of say if you're in a rush and you don't measure out something one day, well, you kind of know how much you might need. Another important tool in the bar world would be a strainer. This here is a Hawthorne strainer. You're going to find that there's this nice coil that helps reserve any ice and solids there, and that fits into literally any cocktail shaker top, any pint glass top, and even the fanciest of mixing shaker tops. Now, what many of you may have from some vestige of some gift or home collection is the other type of strainer that bartenders use, which is the julep strainer. Is this awesome? No, it is simply not awesome. It is cumbersome. It slips around. It doesn't make your julep taste any better than a Hawthorne strainer does. And it's quite frankly hard to wedge it in perfectly when pouring, and some liquid can escape out from around the side. So, use this for straining off the tiniest portion of pasta or throw it out. If you do not have any strainer of any kind, consider it a slotted spoon to be a perfect straining device as you would look to pour a cocktail. When it comes to measuring our ingredients today, we have hopefully a jigger. If you do not, a shot glass, which filled to the brim is likely a 1.5 ounce shot glass. With about a quarter of an inch from the top is an ounce, and then you can kind of eyeball the levels down below that. There's two different kinds of jiggers that you may have. Usually this hourglass shape is 1 ounce filled to the brim on the top and 2 ounces filled to the brim on the bottom. A good one will have little lines on the outside or the inside to show you the measurements of 1/4 ounce, 1/2 ounce, 3/4, and the like. So I really like this one because I like to play with it as I make and talk. But there's also another one that has got a little spout, very clean and tidy for the home bar that I definitely recommend as well. Another piece of equipment that we'll need, some of you have that levered citrus squeezer. That's a great bit of citrus for assisting with garnering your fresh juices. But I just use a measuring glass and the classic OJ production here. And then aside from that, I just recommend that you have a cutting board of some sort, a nice sharp knife. And here is what is not in the cards. A little bit of salt, okay? I like not necessarily your iodized salt that's the super fine grain, but maybe like a ground, Morton's sea salt or kosher salt. We'll get into the usage here, but this is definitely something that I like to add to the mix for consideration after a long summer of kind of not getting up to the top tier of cocktail nuance. Well, we're going to do that today. We're going to make these flavors pop. You'll see how the salt comes in. Now, I had asked you all to, read over this book and select from page 3 one of the 6 featured cocktails that I'll be making today, which are on page 3. Those are the 6 listed there. Every cocktail has the prescribed drink vessel that you would be making it in right below it, and on the pages as we turn through. And then if you didn't catch it already, each of these spirits of the 6 that you picked up at Solovino, thank you very much for supporting local. They've got a little introductory page on each one of the spirits and from whence it comes, its proof, and a little bit about it. So that's how you kind of go through, and as your curiosity is hopefully built by the end of this, and you've got some remaining volume, please do go flip on through and find some other drinks to make at home. Many of them being seasonal. Candy cane mojito is in there, kind of crazy, not my usual style, but peppermint flavor, mojito, mint flavor. Hey, it works out. It actually tastes pretty good, and it's a lovely pale pink color. So that's what we'll be referencing and going through today. We now kind of know what we have. There are some of you that may have already prepared a spiced honey simple syrup. That will be utilized today in one of the drinks that I'm making, which is the Gold Rush. Another syrup that's utilized throughout is a darker, thicker, almost like a mix between a grenadine, but homemade, so much better. And also kind of like a pomegranate infused demerara or dark raw sugar simple syrup. Really, really keen on the flavor. And then you'll notice I've just got the classic, that 1-to-1 ratio, but you'll get right away. And those of you who have been with me before know that bleached sugar sucks. Add fresh juice always, and make your own simple, because it costs a fraction of buying it at the store, and it's not been hyper processed. So this is just 1 part organic cane sugar, 1 part water, stirred for about 90 seconds, and we're good to go. I did want to take a moment to just highlight a few of the things that I tend to use. I like organic products. This is my organic cane sugar that can be found at the co-op or Kowalski's where I got it. And then that raw turbinado is a really great base for your darker simple syrups. Pairs well often with your whiskey-based drinks. Coaxes out that caramel. And then for those of you who have already prepared the pomegranate demerara syrup, this is that 100% palm juice that's so widely available. It is so tart, so acidic, and so beautifully bitter that when combined with that rich sugar, this is a syrup that you should try. I'll note that each of the cocktail recipes do reference the simple syrup recipes, which is in fact the very last page of our cocktail feature today. So let's first do one thing. Because my golden rule is, you can't just start talking and droning on for 50 minutes in a cocktail tasting. So we're going to pause a moment to get into the build of the first cocktail, but the spirit that maybe you're not going to mix with today, or one of the bottles that you haven't selected to make along with me today in the class, well, choose it. Pour a little dram. Have a little sip, explore a little something new, while I bring us up to speed in kind of a context of where we arrived and how we arrived here in a chronological notion in the history of bartending. So I'm having a little bump of the Aksanj, the Sansange Clarin rum from Haiti, and would like to say cheers and thank you, and then sit back and ask you to abide by me for a few minutes while I bring us up to speed and frame this cocktail class up. Cheers. All right, Sam and Sue, did you have anything in the chat function in terms of questions for the types of supplies that are needed that I should pause and recap for anybody? And by the way, everybody who's here, it's a small enough group. If you'd like to unmute yourself literally at any time to jump in and ask a question, it's not like we've got 50 people here and have to observe workplace decorum. Please just talk to me. I know you all, and I'm happy to have you here. So unmute to your heart's content. I'm here to listen. Anything? All right. Cool. That's all good. That's all good. All right. So this is really the continuation and the culmination, as I mentioned, of many different seasonal stints, and from gin to mezcal and tequila to bourbon and rye and scotch that we have been through with the University Club cocktail program meeting, I think 5 times over the course of this year. But what we never really did was discuss, especially in this time of perspective and understanding where we are in this industry, sans bar culture, where we can go out and be in person. Let's dive into that for a moment, because I've glossed over that, and I'm a bit of a history nerd in the beverage realm, so I'd really like to take you through that time. So many of us know that alcohol in the fermented form has existed forever, whether that was achieved in late September, warm up after berries were still on the branch, and some little starling came along and consumed it and went wobbly and crash landed, because within that berry, those sugars were fermenting in a late summer heat. That's an anaerobic fermentation, a beautiful little natural scenario. Of course, that's the derivation of wine as well. And then in terms of mead, in terms of beer, in terms of all of these other fermented scenarios, in agave, which is pulque, or even a sugar cane. Think of centuries ago a farmer who collected barley and then left it in his cart over the course of a storm. It got rained on, maybe there's some water in there, and the next day or two there's some warm sun, and when he gets back out to it, there's this bubbly kind of yeasty rising dough type of character to it. And if it were to be tasted, well, shit, that's kind of fun. There's a little buzz involved there. So the understanding of the natural processes of fermentation have always been fairly easy to understand. And the sciences of it, let's not get into that. What you need to know is that yeast is a Pac-Man, okay? It chomps up these little monosaccharides of fermentable sugar and it shits out alcohol, all right? Some byproducts include heat and CO2 and sulfites, but that's generally exactly what you need to know. But when the realm of distilling comes into account, now that's something we can trace back to the Chinese, in fact. So alcohol was always around, and then spirits really can be traced back to the 12th century in the Far East, and then bartenders. That term of why we're here, why we're trying to fill this void at home in the holidays. We really came about 200 years ago. In the early 1800s is when bartenders started to be mentioned in print and rose to prominence. Before bartenders, there were punch houses. Before individual sized drinks, there was punch, and there was tapped kegs of mead and ale and kegs of wine. So as the fermented, started to give a little ground, and there was the distilled came into the mention, then punches out to be created, where teas and sugars and juices and meads and wines were all mixed together, and it was kind of like that grog bowl where you go into some type of establishment or serve for a gathering. In fact, George Washington was so famous for lobbying his neighbors for votes that he was famous for doling out flagons or rations of his homemade punch and his homemade access to wines and spirits. So punch gave way to the single serving as hospitality as we know it today started to arise. And then the need for a bartender or somebody who knew how to handle and manipulate those spirits, gave way to the golden age of cocktails. Now, we really can attribute a lot of the genesis of attention to individuals serving elevated version cocktails to Jerry Thomas. And that's the mid-1800s there. He's a famous bartender in New York City. Wrote The Bartender's Guide, a great coffee book table if you're so inclined. Jerry Thomas, Bartender's Guide. And that was a period of time when there was plenty of access to a ton of different spirits. It was the rise of the coupe glass and the cocktail-shaped glasses. And of course, that's when the old-fashioned cocktail came to light as well. Then, of course, we all know and can converse, about Prohibition and its influence, but we never really think about what a remarkable just halt in any type of spirits and bar culture that truly did. Let's say the golden age for cocktails operates here from the mid-1800s till 1919. That's, of course, the time span of Prohibition, from 1919 to December 5th of 1933. That's Repeal Day. But during that spectrum of Prohibition, we completely lost base with all of our artistic drivers who were really probably ahead of some culinary careers in terms of progressing and building up the caliber and ingenuity of the bar scene. Now, those people who were famous for making drinks and such, and by the way, there were many, especially along the eastern seaboard. Well, they, much like writers, much like people who felt artistically suppressed during Prohibition, they flew to places like Havana or to Paris, where this expat culture of expression and rogue American artistry was able to continue and thrive. Things like Death in the Afternoon, the Golden Age Martini, which is our second drink we're making this evening, can harken back to that period of time. But then let's just look at 1933 till 1990s. Okay, that is the dark age of cocktails. Literally, it's written categorically as the dark age of cocktails. Because what did we do? Well, we were just kind of we had kind of lost our finesse in terms of alcohol production. A lot of companies just lost their footing and had to completely dissolve if they didn't do so illegally. But bathtub gin, lose your vision type of whiskey, that stuff needed to be masked by sugars. So what arose from that? The thing that I just disliked the most, the two-part cocktail. Orange juice and vodka, Coca-Cola and Captain Morgan, gin and tonic. Okay, I've had hundreds of these in my life. We've all had hundreds and thousands of these drinks, but where is the artistry? Where is this notion of creativity and artistry in that? And that's where we have largely one single gentleman to thank to bridge the gap from what's going on in London and Berlin, where cocktail culture had continued and brought it back to the States. And that man's name is Dale DeGroff. The Craft of the Cocktail, Dale DeGroff, The Craft of the Cocktail, another perfect coffee table book that was produced in the late 90s. And that gave way to some of the most formative revivals of craft cocktails, artisanal products utilized in the US. And that truly got its foothold in the early 2000s when we look at bars like Please Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Employees Only, or Please Don't Tell, sorry, Employees Only, Death and Company, Attaboy. And now these cocktail bars, can be found in hubs all across the country, New York, DC, Nashville, Denver, Seattle. I'd like to think the Twin Cities does more than hold its own in terms of a national cocktail scene. And of course, now there's this proliferation of unique and oftentimes expensive spirits that we find in a store like Solo Vino or, France 44 on the other side of the river. And we truly don't know what to do with them. That's why this entire notion of the cocktail club was created. And that is my summary as to truly setting a chronological perspective of why we're here today. So thank you so much for bearing with me on my little meandering historical tour there. I think now you guys have waited plenty long enough, and it's time to get into our first drink of the night. So let's do so. Show of hands, or actually unmute and pipe up if anybody is going to be making the rosemary gimlet with me right now to start things off.
Rob and I are.
All right, let's do it. And let's gather the things that we'll need. The spirit base is Gin Gigi. I'd like you guys who are not making it to follow along, so you can feel well versed as you go. Something to say about this: an amazing value. This is a very affordable product. It's got so much hyper aromatic quality to it. It's produced in a small distillery in Southwest India, Goa, which has an amazing historical significance as a port, an international port. Did a lot of trade with Portugal, and interestingly, things like saffron and cashews, and that was Goa to Lisbon was really the network that introduced some Eastern flavors with Western European flavors. But what I love about this bottle, if you guys were to grab it and turn it around, it is so beautifully descriptive, unlike many gins out there, as to what you might see as botanicals. Sometimes those are considered proprietary notions, and distilleries do not disclose, but I really, really love this. Now, one thing I would say that really resonates with me are the last two, the Tulsi and chamomile, both leaves that are very aromatic and making this a very floral sense. You'll notice there's cashew in here as well. Lends a nice textural component to our cocktail. So we've got our gin, and with the gimlet, we know that this is within that classic category of a sour, where you have 2 ounces of your base spirit and then equal parts of your sugar and your acid. We should take a moment to recap really fast why, why we, in the sour realm, why we use limes and lemons. Lemons have they both have about 6% of the water weight or the juice or liquid weight within them attributed to actual acid. This being 100% citric acid, really kind of a flavor that we know and well. But the limes have a mix of malic and citric acid. That malic acid, think of it more like the skin or the underripe part of a green apple, where it's snappy and a touch bitter and brisk. And so they can be used very interchangeably. And so as we look at drinks in the sour category, whether they be a gimlet, whether they be a daiquiri, whether they be a gold rush, boom, we've got 3 drinks that we're making with that same recipe to kind of showcase the wide range and the differentiation of the spirits that you can use to make a sour categorized gin. So let's procure some lime juice. We've got a lime, let's roll it out. Use your knife, use your cutting board, slice it. And I should mention that for this drink as well, this is the one drink that we're just going to use our classic simple syrup for. Just 1 part sugar, 1 part water. So we've got our lime cut. Don't know how you are juicing at home, but I am juicing like this. A half a lime is likely going to get me to that 3/4 of an ounce idea. Keep in mind that if you have just a tablespoon at home, well, that is a totally viable option for measuring. I'm just going to do 2 just to be sure. And the conversion is half an ounce is 1 tablespoon. So 1.5 tablespoons would be the amount of lime juice that you need for this drink. So I've got my fresh lime juice. It's got a little pulp in it. Love that. That helps to aerate and oxygenate and grab a wonderful texture as we go. We've got our simple syrup, and usually it's that easy. Of course, the glassware as well. A coupe glass, a martini glass, or as I choose, a Nick and Nora is quite good. But you're like, well, I don't see this rosemary aspect of it. Well, I chose the rosemary because it strikes me as very seasonal. And here's how we're going to impart the rosemary into the drink in 2 ways. One will be at the last step when we smack it to release the aromatics and have that delivered right to our nose as we go. But also in the mixing process, we can bruise that as we go. So here's a quick tip. What is most aesthetically pleasing is that nice little splayed frond of rosemary at the very tip. So let's take that, pick it off, and use that, set it to the side so we can garnish, as that will rest on the surface of the drink. Now, we've got the remainder of our frond of rosemary that I'd like to strip and drop in the glass. For those who have been with me before, you know that the bartender's rule is that you always build your ingredients in a naked glass. Do not put ice in first. We are going to control our dilution throughout every step of this process. Okay? And the other bartender's notion is you always start with your smallest measure ingredient, whether that be bitters, syrup, a modifier, and then your base spirit. Why do you do that? Well, if you just so happen to mess up, you're not spoiling the entirety of the contents of your shaker and less of a liquid or financial or emotional loss going forward. All right, so we're building in here. Those of you who have the classic home gear, the cobbler shaker, which is the 3-part shaker at home. I forgot to detail this. This also works great. As a bartender, you lose this shit under the fridge all the time during a shift, so it's just not viable. But in practice at home, shaking with this, it's really awesome. And if you have one of these, you know, pretty good little measuring glass as well to use as a jigger. So let's now follow our recipe and begin our measurements. So we're going to go 0.75, 3/4 ounce of our simple syrup. We're going to take that freshly squeezed lime juice, go 3/4 ounce. You always want to have an equal part for optimal balance of our acidic scenario versus our sweet scenario. And then let's take our gingeji, pour a full 2 ounces. Give that a little nose before you dump it in. Oh, yeah, beautifully aromatic. That juniper comes through. There's this Himalayan juniper that's got this beautiful effusive character utilized here. That definitely comes through mighty bright as well. So we've got the rosemary within, we've got the sugar, we've got the lime juice, and we have our base spirit. It's now time to grab a little ice, dump it in. We're going to shake vigorously, and that will infuse some of the character of rosemary into our drink. And then we're going to strain it into our coupe glass. Now, please stop before you get too far down the road. This is another one of those unlisted bartender tips that those of you who are participating today will get. Now, what is a catalyst for flavor in the culinary world? Salt. I am going to prescribe for every single drink that we make this afternoon that we put 2 or 3, 4 small kernels of salt. Is this to perceive the flavor of salinity? Absolutely not. We want to add just the right amount to treat it as like when we're making our caprese salad at home in the summer. And you're like, oh, I've got this beautiful fresh mozzarella, and I just harvested this tomato out of my garden. I've got this basil. Why is this not flavorful? And then you hit it with a little bit of that salt, and it just makes a tomato pop. Well, the same thing exists across the board to elevate flavor throughout the culinary world. And the same thing translates to what we're making in the glass here. So we have salt, sugar, acid, spirit, and an herb in here. Lock it in, shake for 15 seconds, get back with me then. Should have a little froth on the top of it. So something that occurs is with that lime juice, as we shake vigorously, there's a breaking of the cell walls and a really nice emulsification that occurs to really infuse that beautiful fresh lime juice. Never, never, never are we using something like a Rose's lime or a pasteurized ingredient there. Just has this beautiful, beautiful color to it. And you can see that in the glass. Now we're gonna take that frond from the tip of the rosemary, spread it out in your hand. Like I said, smack it to release those aromatics and help it lay flat. And then you'll notice that it will rest beautifully right on the top of your glass. I think, yeah, you can see that decently with my camera angle. And for Rob and Danielle who mixed with me, and for those who will mix with me soon, I'll move along quickly, but cheers to our first cocktail. Boom. Yeah, I can dig that. My wife's gonna want that. I'm gonna save that one. Rob and Danielle, how'd it turn out?
Very good.
Very good.
Nice, nice. Love it, guys. All right, so who is coming with me on this ride into the Golden Age Martini? Classic Martini territory.
I'm going to do that.
Awesome. Was that Peter that I heard?
Uh-huh.
Awesome. Thank you, Peter. All right, let's talk about this for a moment, because this is really quite simple. This is just a 3-ingredient scenario. We've got our Gin Gigi. We've got our Bordiga Extra Dry Vermouth from the northwest portion of Italy. It's this alpine region in the foothills of the Alps. And this is just an uncanny version of vermouth. I've talked to you all before about how there's this really daunting or polarizing aspect to vermouth. Well, let's consider it aromatized wine. Let's not think of it as anything you've ever tasted in the past. This is a fully mature wine that was made very intentionally with some high quality, high altitude grapes. And the botanicals that go into this vermouth to create that bitterness, to create that additional flavor, well, they were wild sourced by literally Occitan shepherds high up in the mountains. That's a handshake agreement that they just know the prime ripeness and these beautiful versions of alpine gentian and wormwood and all types of things that go into bittering this vermouth. Because a vermouth, remember, is a wine with a spirit added to it to fortify it. And in that spirit is a maceration of bitter, sometimes sweet, and aromatic herbs. And that's really what a vermouth is. And then we're going to want a lemon simply for garnish. Now, the ratio here is key, because before the dark age where good vermouth was not largely available in the U.S., vermouth culture was strong. People love vermouth as aperitif and digestif scenario. And I just absolutely recommend spending some money anytime you're going to purchase vermouth. Because if you buy the shit for $5.99, you're just insulting your purchase of a quality artisanal product, which is your base spirit. Now, our ratio here is 2 ounces to 1 ounce. It's very simple. We're not adding bitters here, but a classic martini as a cocktail category also pertains to a Manhattan. 2 parts spirit, 1 part vermouth. The only thing that in a Manhattan occurs as well is 2 part bitters. You'll see it in the recipe, but 212, classic Manhattan recipe, also the area code for Manhattan. A cool little thing that might help you win some money on Cash Cab someday when we can all travel again. Anyways, you asked me this, Joel, why the hell are you so flippantly rotating between stirring your drinks and shaking your drinks? What's the rhyme or reason? How do I know at home? Okay, well, let's play it like this. We know there's 5 general massive cocktail categories. There's a Negroni, there is a Martini or Manhattan, there's a sour, there's a deviation of a sour called a Daisy, which we'll get into later. And then there's a French 75 or a Collins that involves a spritz or a wine, a sparkling wine. All cocktails are derived from, most all cocktails are from these mother sauce 5 basic recipes. But then in addition, more importantly to this question I just posed, how do I know when to shake or to stir? This becomes much more simple and much more easy to remember. If there is any opaque, cloudy ingredient or fresh juice, which are cloudy, shake. If they're clear ingredients, stir. Okay? Opacity, shake. Clear ingredients, stir. Opacity or opaque or cloudiness infers that there's some type of solid suspended in solution there, and you really want to bust those up and get that homogeneous mixture and aerate via the shaking to have a beautiful gimlet or a daiquiri like we just had. And then if we're not using any fresh products, but we've got clear things to start with, then we stir. And the stirring wants to be a very gentle process where you're literally just arriving at your dilution slowly without jostling, aerating, and otherwise abusing the spirit. So let's make this. This is very, very quite simple. We've got our jigger. Peter, you're following along here. We start with the lower quantity item first. Ortiga extra dry vermouth, 1 full ounce. So an interesting fact about vermouth, you guys, as you're following on, vermouth etymologically can be traced back to vermouth, vermwood, wormwood, okay? Because in vermouth, the primary bittering agent is in fact wormwood. The same primary bittering agent in absinthe. So the scientific name is absinthe for wormwood. There are other products that use things like gentian or use things like cinchona to find their bittering profile. Wormwood, vermouth sometimes do that, but primarily they use wormwood. Now, 2 ounces, Peter, of our Gin GG India Dry Gin. We are not making a gin and tonic today, but there is a recipe for a Spanish gin and tonic in your little cocktail compendium there. And I would recommend you look at that because that's a beautiful, very aromatic recipe that pays homage to the fact that, sure, it's not a Spanish gin, but the gin and tonic uses a ton of herbs and a wine glass to bring the aromatics to the forefront. And then it's perfectly historically appropriate to use an Indian gin because, well, the gin and tonic was conceived in India. Of course, the British Royal Navy had rations of both rum and gin, and they were naval strength. I mean, they were high proof, so that if they spilled, they would not sodden the barrels of gunpowder that existed right next to them on their journey down in the base of the ship as ballast. So what did those spirits need? Well, they needed quite a bit of amendment to make them palatable. And that, that included, well, what else did they have on board? Scurvy was a big problem for the British Royal Navy, so they had limes. Well, they just so happened to throw some lime juice and some sugar into those barrels of rum. Well, what do you have there? You've got your basic recipe for a daiquiri, because the limes wouldn't survive the whole 3 months of a seafaring voyage. How would they survive? Well, in a high-proof spirit, they would. So, boom, there you got it. And what was also going through the ranks of the Royal British Navy when they were in their multiple colonizing attempts and efforts? Well, there was a ton of malaria at that time. And ethnobotanists were just beginning to discover that cinchona or quinine or quinquina or quinoa, those are all synonyms, can be used to combat the effects of malaria. So quinine water, which is bitter, stores very well on a seafaring voyage, and it's got a little sweetness to it, can be mixed with gin, which happened to be one of their rations, and malaria. Yeah, prevalent among the colonizing soldiers. Absolutely. All of this makes sense. I just love tying in the history of what we're drinking into why recipes have evolved that way. I talked for about a minute or 90 seconds there. Dilution is gentle. Dilution is key. What did we forget, Peter? Before you stir, a couple kernels of salt. Let's get back in there and dissolve those a little bit. Okay. You'll notice that I'm you can use a chopstick, you can use a straw, you can use a nice teaspoon, whatever. But you'll notice that with a bar spoon, it has this twirled handle, and at the base of it, it is generally flat along one side and just curves in. That flat side is intended to rest on the inside of your glass and stay in contact with it the entire time, and in fact spin as you stir. Now that technique is tough, and it involves pulling with 2 fingers in front and pushing with the 2 fingers on the bottom. It honestly takes a little bit to master, and if you can do 4 at once, 2 in each hand during 7:30 at a restaurant, that's when you get that nod from the bartender. You're like, I see you. You've been stirring for a few years now, haven't you? So anyways, now we've achieved our dilution. Our salt has been incorporated in to help that beverage pop. Peter, grab a coupe, and Nick and Nora, what have you, and let's strain in. An olive is a suitable garnish here as well. I tend to like with a beautiful aromatic gin like this. Some salinity is nice, but really pull out some beautiful character of this particular set of ingredients. I like to use lemon as the garnish. Now, Peter, since you're the one following along with me, use your vegetable peeler and take a nice swath of lemon peel. And then any garnishment that occurs tonight, we're going to take it and we're going to find, a couple pinches along here. We're going to put it right near the surface. We're going to pinch, and then we're going to shift, and we're going to pinch. Okay. Then we can, do our fanciful twirling. And before we drop it in, here's one seemingly extraneous bartender trick that actually does have a use. So after you express those oils, you can look at it. It's kind of glistening at it. Gosh, it smells so beautiful. Why don't you take that and actually rub it on the exterior of your glass? It seems like, well, what the hell is that for? Well, you're not going to drink necessarily from all sides around the circumference of the glass. So as you do drink this beautifully dotted with essential oil surface of the glass, you still want those aromatics throughout the entirety of the drink. You're going to have them to smell as you consume along the edge of the glass. So I raise a glass to you all, and cheers, Peter. Little bitter edge. I really love that extra dry vermouth. Okay, so Sam, Sue, anybody who's with us? Do we have any questions thus far?
I do not have any in the chat, but it is a small group, so I think people
Yeah,
can
awesome. I know that we'll chime in. Those of you following along, we're going on to our third drink now. Page through the multiple recipes of gin-based drinks. Definitely look at that holiday spiced bee's knees, because anybody who has made a honey simple syrup that's to be used in the Gold Rush 2 cocktails from now, well, that can be used in the gin-based bee's knees. Fantastic. So now we know that we're in the rum category. If you see this as you're paging through, you know that our featured drink will be the full page spread right after. Okay. Pomegranate daiquiri. Any takers? Anybody making pomegranate daiquiri? I see Lynn is awesome. I can't see a couple of the other of you, but what I will say here is that this is a dark, dense Demerara pomegranate simple syrup. The recipe's in the back, but you use that fresh, acidic pomegranate juice. It actually has some tannin to it, too. Think about the world of wine. And we're going to use that in combination with lime juice in a classic sour build. So we know that this sour is exactly the same for the purpose of balance as our gimlet was. 2 ounces spirit, 3/4 ounces sugar, 3/4 ounces acidity. We're adding that flair in the pomegranate form with that juice, replacement of water. And if you want to make this in all types of Christmassy type of cocktail, and you still have some rosemary left, well, I think I do want a little rosemary as a garnish. I'm going to pick this and put it aside. So we know that we have our sugar, we've got our citrus, lime, and we've got our spirit. So what makes this different, other than it being a absolutely freaking cool and captivating label design? This is a producer of organic rums from Haiti. This producer is a very, very small operation. They do produce a barreled or aged rum, but what you need to know about this is not Bacardi, okay? This is not Bacardi. If you had tasted it or smelled it, you'll notice all of these notes of verdancy. Things like key lime and mint and banana and all of these ester compounds, which are hyperaromatic, that result from certain forms of the fermentable sugar that is used, and also from the temperature during distillation and fermentation. This is similar. This is technically a claret, or similar to a cachaça from South America, also similar to what the French would call rum agricole. What is different about this rum versus all the other white rums of the world? Well, this, in fact, uses, so you got people literally with machete cutting down these 12-foot cane fields. And they're kind of, they've got these sections, just like bamboo would do. And inside, there's a free run cane juice that, as you cut them and process them back at the home, like these farmers do, they'll run out. And so that's the base material before you grind it down to get all the sugar out of it, like a big industrial production would do. That free run cane juice is actually what is fermented and then distilled. So it is the purest of the sugar of the cane plant, and it has not been reduced down on its way to becoming molasses or crystallized sugar like other rums use. So other light rums use a mid-reduction cane syrup to then ferment and distill. This is the fresh, okay? So let's roll out our lime. And we see our measurements as we go here. We're at 3/4 ounce. Let's start with the lime and get it mixed.
And sorry, while you're doing that, Joel, there was a question about what olive was used before, or
What
kind
olive?
of olive. Yeah, what kind of olive?
Yeah, so Spanish Queen is good. The culinary olives like Chirignola or kind of brassy, crunchy olives or niçoise or anything. That's not exactly the flavor that I like to go for. I like a Spanish Queen olive or a cocktail olive, or even a olive that's pimento stuffed. You can feel comfortable selecting, olives at your local retailer, your spirits retailer, and those will be a nice kind of saline-driven cocktail olive. Yeah. Otherwise, I would caution you to beware of pits if you go to the olive bar at your local co-op. I mean, that could have some pits in there and might have a little bit different brininess, not as much salinity to it. All right, we are shaking this drink because we know that it does contain fresh juice or an opaque ingredient. So 3/4 ounce. We've got our beautiful dense pomegranate simple syrup. And 3/4 ounce. And flipping it around for 2 ounces of our grassy, verdant, and expressive version of true white rum. All right, Oxange. Sange means angel in French or Creole, and so Ox means without the angel share. Angel share is that evaporation that happens when things are aged in a barrel. So that's kind of interesting to know that this is a rum without the angel's share removed. So no evaporation occurs when it's not aged in barrel. You see now that I'm adding the ice. I'm going to shake to dilute and emulsify. Before we do anything, we add a touch of salt. And going with the Nick and Nora glass.
I forgot the salt. I guess I'm gonna have to make two so I can compare.
There you go. That's a good idea. So that beautiful color of pomegranate comes out in this drink. That's why, additionally, I find it to be seasonally appropriate. Wow, that's so much like banana and high ester flavorful things emanating from this. I said I wanted a little ultra Christmassy version of this pomegranate daiquiri. So I am expressing a rosemary frond. And that it's going to taste pretty tropical and wacky and like a trip to the Caribbean or tiki style, but that looks fairly Christmassy. So cheers. Lynn, do you get that crazy kind of bravado of the grassy primary fruitiness of this rum? Does it come through for you?
Oh, this is amazing. Really good.
It's way different than your every other day type of white rum, yeah?
You know, I can't really compare because I'm not a rum drinker normally.
Okay.
So, but I like this a lot.
That flavor that you get, that funky that you get, which funky is used to describe rum for sure. That's a very good, viable term. That is what the tiki bar hounds, that's what they seek out, that rum funk. As you guys page through the recipes in the rum category, you'll notice a jungle bird and a candy cane mojito. That jungle bird is a cult classic in the tiki bar rum. And then, since this is such a hyper expressive rum, I've got a recipe for a hot buttered rum here. This works well, but maybe you might have to add a little bit more sugar for your taste than I listed here. Maybe more than a tablespoon. Or you can use any aged or dark rum or black extract rum for a hot buttered rum. I've got the caipirinha version here. And now we are on to our barreled spirits. So
Another question from the group from the Gilligan family is would this be good in eggnog?
So I have not tried it in eggnog. I advise you, since you now have a bottle, to try it. But something to be said about making the best rum drinks possible. I like to have two rums on my bar at home, a white or an agricole style, and then an aged style. And I find that the most complexity for any type of drink, whether it be a hot drink or a daiquiri or the elevated version of a Hemingway daiquiri, which we can talk about another time. Well, those two rums can be split based. You can do half a portion of a darker rum and half a portion of a lighter rum to get kind of the best of both worlds. So if you do have two, that would be a great time to mix them both up into that eggnog, so you get a little bit of that spiced kind of molasses cask finish that a Gosling's or an aged Appleton or Bapton Clems or Black Top would have. So great question, but try them both ways. That's what I would recommend. All right, we are on to featuring a beautiful 3-year-old local Minnesota product. I got to tell you guys this. I'm so proud to represent J. Carver Whiskey out of Waconia, Minnesota, because one of their founders and their primary outreach director and kind of flavor profile wizard is Gina Holman, who was my sommelier instructor some 8 years ago. So that is a beautiful connection when she was still in the wine world, and now she has translated over to the spirits game. What we know about J. Carver is they are the epitome of what it means to do everything the Minnesota way. This are Minnesota grains that are distilled on site. The wood that's used to house these products are Minnesota oak trees that are then, turned into barrels by coopers here in Minnesota and aged for an average of 3 years this product that's in your hand is a local, all Minnesotan, from start to finish, full Minnesota whiskey. When they first released, they didn't have, all of this time and resources to lay it down. So if you have not tried the whole spectrum of J. Carver products, maybe since you first saw them on the marketplace 5, 6, 7 years ago, well, I can assure you that the trajectory is flying high in terms of the additional barrel quality that you're going to find in this beautiful straight rye whiskey. So we've got around over 60% of rye in here. There is a little bit of corn. There's a little bit of malted barley in here as well to give it some sweetness and give it some texture. But as I chose a rye whiskey for this rather than a bourbon, is because I like the spice. This kind of a verdant, spicy character, like a cardamom punch that a rye whiskey will lend. And this also has some of that corn, some of that barley to round it out, so it's not such a foreign whiskey, but wanted to, bring some things to the table that are not altogether known. So this is a whiskey. Many people say, you never shake a whiskey drink. Well, guess what? Our first thing that we've got, that first full page profile, is the Gold Rush. This has what? Lemon juice in it, along with simple syrup. So lemon juice has, an opaque character. We are shaking. Let's get our lemon juice prepped. As I do this, I've got 2 of these. So as I do this, I'd like to hear from the crew who is making this Gold Rush with me today.
Rob is.
All right. So I really like the flavors, Rob, and the honey simple syrup. Like I mentioned before, a bee's knees is a classic gin-based drink that utilizes honey as its sugar alongside lemon. So different than a gimlet because you use lemon rather than lime, and different than a gimlet because you use a honey simple syrup rather than just a sugar-based simple syrup. So I'm going to slice into my lemon. Wow. And just going to juice about 1/2 of it. That should be, I got a large lemon here, so that should be sufficient. And why I added some spices to kind of macerate and mull in with the honey simple syrup that I made. Directions are on the back if I remind you. Well, because that's just, something about that clove, that pantry spice, just evokes a seasonality of, this time of year. Really like to include that. So as we mix, we've got our cocktail shaker naked, nothing in it yet. We're going to use the small side of the jigger, our freshly squeezed lemon juice. We're going to start with 3/4 ounce or 1.5 teaspoons of fresh lemon juice. Then we're going to reach for that exciting infused spice. I used 1 clove of star anise. I used a couple sticks of cinnamon that I crunched up and kind of dropped in there. I used a couple kind of smashed grounds of allspice. I put a fresh cardamom pod in here. I actually dropped a dried cayenne chili pepper in here to add a little insinuation of heat, and like a little mittful of full cloves. So when they're whole like that, it takes a while for them to kind of leach out all that flavor. That's why I encourage you in the recipe to put them in while it's hot and to stir that water and honey mixture for longer than you usually would. And then let it steep with all those ingredients in the fridge for a few hours before you strain off the final product. So here it is. Let's go 3/4 ounce.
While you pour, there was another question by the Gilligan family. Do you feel it is important to use organic lemons or limes so as not to have pesticide taste?
Yeah, that's a great question. So as a bartender, one of my pet peeves is that bartenders that don't wash the exterior of their citrus before they cut all their wedges and garnishes for the hundreds of drinks they're going to make in an evening, because that's when, the surface that's actually getting sprayed actually might have remnants of pesticide, herbicide, insecticide. Okay, or some type of fertilizer of some sort. So that's the worry in citrus. you could actually, without washing in a non-organic product, you could translate some of that into your beverage. So it's a good concern to have. Now, if you wash it thoroughly, which is not going to damage the product at all, I think that you're fairly safe. As a principle, I like to endorse organics and sustainability in farming, so I would recommend them. I suppose that's about all I have to say on that matter. Now, before any of you who are mixing, go ahead and add the bourbon. Let's not forget, let's reach over and grab our pinch of salt, a couple of kernels. I'm not quite like Salt Bay guy who does it down the forearm. I should, but I just don't have those little glasses. But anyways, so we've got our lemon juice, we've got our simple syrup, we've got our salt. Let's now measure out 2 ounces of J. Carver straight rye whiskey. And for posterity's sake, cheers. Man, that's got a lot of caramel to it. It's got a lot of orange to it. It's got white pepper. It's even got some red fruit to it, like a currant or something like that, like a medjool date or something. Wow, that is really nice. So now we're going to add ice to our shaker. We're going to bruise for 15 seconds. We are going to strain into a fresh glass. And because of my first instance of poor foresight, I don't have an extra martini glass because I have not been dumping out these drinks. So I am actually going to utilize a low ball glass with a large format ice cube and go a little different and not serve this up. You'll notice that in the picture, I recommend a martini coupe or Nick and Nora. But what's this really going to hurt? I don't think anybody's going to be too angry. I hope not, anyways, that I'm doing this. All right, shake away. See, look at how that aeration translates after the into the final product. Look at how like cloudy, light, pale gold that is. It's really beautiful in the glass. We're not done yet. Garnish here is again the same principle as with the lemon before. We'll use our potato peeler, carrot peeler, Y peeler, what have you, to grab a nice swath of lemon peel. Set that aside, express the lemon essential oils onto the surface of the drink, give it a good twirl to coax more out, wrap it around the side to make it stick, drop it on top artfully, and enjoy. Cheers. The Gold Rush, you did not see these on a lot of menus. This is a killer, light, bourbon-based or rye-based sour. I definitely recommend you guys try this at home if you haven't already tried it with me today, because that spice component comes through in just a delicate way. And I'll say this, if you're feeling very, very exploratory and you like a texture of an egg white in your drink, you'd separate the yolk out, drop an egg white in here, bruise for an even longer period of time before straining. And then you've got a classic rye whiskey sour with the thickness of an egg white to lend an even more drastic textural component to it. Cheers. Questions, hit me.
I got nothing. They were more in line this time.
You got
Very
it.
good. Very good. Great.
Awesome. So we're right on time. We're just past 4, and we've got 2 drinks left. So let's talk about our next one, which is a Boulevardier. I will be completely transparent in the fact that the Boulevardier is my single favorite cocktail in the world. One, because you already know I love rye whiskey, and 2, I love bitter things. And so the 3, there's no juice, no syrups involved here. This is essentially a Negroni, but not using gin, using rye instead. So I'll line up our 3 products. The historic recipe is 1 part sweet vermouth. Here, I encourage you to page through to the latter portion of this little cocktail packet where you see some information about this vermouth produced way down in the southern part of Pacific and Mediterranean proximal of Spain, where they use these really, really outstanding grapes that are so great at retaining acidity. And rather than the other vermouth, which is based on a fully mature white wine, this is a vermouth that is based on a fully mature sherry. So sherry, throughout its time frame and its life, I mentioned this at the outset as people were gathering and logging in. Well, sherry already sees evaporation, oxygenation, and heating throughout its process of developing before it's even bottled. So the fact that we have to worry about the shelf life once open of your vermouths, like the white vermouth that we have is a split format, so it'll be easier to use, but that's good for about 10 days, maybe 2 weeks in the fridge. This red vermouth right here, I have to say, I've done trials with this in my own home, even not refrigerated, and I am confident that this is good, in the fridge especially, for 6 weeks to 2 months. I cannot say that, even remotely that length of time, for any other red or sweet vermouth in our entire marketplace. That fact makes this a perfect home bar ingredient. So we're going to bring back up the J. Carver Rye, and we're going to add into the mix. Those of you who have been with me through the multiple previous cocktail classes through the U Club have known that I'm a huge advocate for something in the red aperitivo category. Gosh, you can't quite see how beautifully red this is. Let me see if I put it behind the white. Yeah, there we go. Okay, a beautiful red product. An aperitivo is like a bittered red Italian-style liqueur, and it's a classic ingredient in a Negroni or in a spritz. Aperol would be qualified in that realm. So would Campari, but rather than a mass-produced product that has synthesized ingredients and red dyes and all that stuff, we've got that same producer, Bordiga, same producer as our extra dry vermouth, that uses a very clean gentian-based bittering profile, but not too bitter for this aperitivo. You'll notice the bottle is bigger than anything else we've got here today. This is actually a liter format. Good news is this is not based on a wine. There's no spoilability here. There's no need to store it in the fridge. This product is 16% alcohol. It's got a sweetness that matches its bitterness. And we're going to evolve past the classic recipe of Negroni and Boulevardier. All the old school things would say 1 ounce, 1 ounce, 1 ounce. No, we've got different things that we're working with here. So we're going to do a waterfall build. And for those of you who still have the St. Agrestis Inferno bitter in your home bars and may have enjoyed that with some of the drinks we made in series past, well, that's a great possibility to use here. That product is a little bit more persistent in the bitter category than the Bordiga Aperitivo. So here, our recipe today is going to be 1.5 ounce of the J. Carver, and then equal parts of 7.75 ounces or 3/4 ounce of both the vermouth and the aperitivo. If you want to try using up some of your Inferno bitter at home, I would do a more extended waterfall where you go 1.5 ounce, 0.1 ounce to 0.75 ounce, because that is more bitter. So, and you don't quite need as much. So I just want to communicate that as you understand the nuances of every spirit that you use in a classic recipe, it's on you to be, embark on like the culinary adventurous endeavor to decide the ratios and evolve your personal drink preference according to what you want. Of course, everything in here pertains to that. These are my recipes that I prescribe for what I think is a balanced drink. But if you need to change and up the acidity, lower the acidity, up the sugar, lower the sugar, get the correct balance struck in any one of these drinks, do so, and it's fun to explore. So there's no opaque ingredients here. There's no fresh juices involved. We are going to be stirring. So Stirring can be done, like I mentioned before, in the same cocktail mixing glass or a pint glass, but for now, I'm going to use my classic pitcher here, which is actually called a Yari, or Yari. I'm not entirely sure. I hear equal factions pronouncing it both ways, but it is a premium, rather expensive Riedel mixing glass with a nice little pour spout here as well. So let's build from the lowest amount component on up. Who's making one of these with me? Sound off for me.
I'm doing it.
Nice. Who was that? I couldn't quite tell.
Peter.
Hey, Peter.
This is Lynn. I'm going to give it a try, but I've got the Bordiga red vermouth instead of the kit.
Cool. So here's what I'll say there. Lynn, that is probably the most elegant and kind of light, beautiful vermouth out there. It does not last as long as the Lustau vermouth. It is probably my personal favorite vermouth that I consume on its own or with a little club soda and a twist type of thing as an aperitif digestif. And it is versatile in making cocktails. Just know that you've got about 1/4 the time to use that bottle up as you do with the Lustau. So thanks for pointing that out.
What was the first thing you put in? I missed it.
I'll go back to it. So the Lustau red vermouth was 3/4 of an ounce. It is this bottle right here.
Wash your hands.
The next product that was I'm adding it, also a clip of 3/4 of an ounce, is the Bordiga Aperitivo from Northwest Italy. And then finally, our largest portion, flip your jigger over, is 1.5 ounces of J. Carver straight rye, Minnesota made. Good little spicy edge. That's why bourbon is not prescribed in this cocktail classically, because you want a little bit more of that oomph. Now, before we add ice and shake, pinch of salt. Don't forget. Plenty of ice to the glass. Chopstick, straw, spoon, what have you. Let's stir carefully and slowly. You'll notice that on the top of the this cocktail card recipe that I said this can be served up or it can be served over ice. Just know that as we make this, you're going to want to have fresh ice in the glass that you will be pouring it into. I rarely advocate for using the ice that you shake or stir with and just dumping it in. That's actually called something in the bartending world that's called a dirty dump. And it's just very rarely utilized in recipe making. Straining over fresh ice is great because what we're doing is we're intentionally creating the right amount of dilution here and then serving it with ice simply to kind of keep that temperature where it is. Because it's not warm to start, it won't melt the ice that's in the glass at the same rate as it's melting the ice it's in contact with here. All right, now you'll notice that in this recipe, I said an orange twist. Now, that is delicious. I'm gonna add something for you to file away in the recesses of your mind for another possibility. This is a grapefruit. Now, why I bring this to the table as an option for a garnish, because anytime you use an aperitivo of any style, a red Italian liqueur, some of this color, some of this bitterness is often derived from orange and grapefruit peels, sometimes lemon as well, sometimes a variety of mandarin and any type of indigenous or local citrus. Now, that being said, I like to coax out, since this is a milder version of an aperitivo, not screamingly bitter where you sprout hairs from your chest and your eyebrows get thick the moment you have it. Well, I like to make some of those more pronounced bitter citrus elements come to light, and that's what the difference of a grapefruit peel does in this scenario. So I have my grapefruit ready. I've got my peeler ready. For those of you at home who did not know this little twist, you've got your orange ready. We're now fully diluted. And gosh, again, we're going to be using a low ball here with ice already in, pouring on top and using the same expressing idea to express some citrus oils onto the surface of the drink. Those of you who made it, what do you think? Have you tried it yet?
So Joel, if we don't have a grapefruit, what are you recommending that we garnish with? I have lemons, orange, okay.
Yep.
We'll be making this one later, Joel.
Yeah, this one has got a beautiful kind of warming character. It's a great winter version of Negroni. Stretch that out, rub it around the outside, slide it in alongside, and boom. My favorite cocktail. Cheers, y'all. Oh, yeah. It's not overpowering because that Bottega Aperitivo doesn't have all the glycerol, weight, and medicinal quality that something like Campari does, which is a really forceful ingredient. And that's why I recommend searching out and spending a little extra coin sometimes when you can in the vermouth and aperitivo, the modifier segment. Cheap modifiers often have hyper-processed ingredients and less nuance of flavor. So I'm here to be an advocate for the small guys.
This is great.
Yeah, liking it?
Oh, a lot.
One of the first times that you've had one of these, or have you had one of these at a restaurant before?
No, you never offered it to me.
Oh, well, shame on me, but my goodness, wow.
Well, my bad, because I always order the Negroni.
That's all right. You got Negronis for the summer, and you've got Boulevardiers for the winter. It's all good.
Okay.
All right.
Joel, this is a great early Christmas gift. Thank you.
Awesome. I'm glad to hear it. I am glad to hear it. All right, guys. So we can just chat and talk away through this last one because we just have about 10 minutes left, and then we'll wrap things up. But it doesn't get any better than this. The buildup, I hope, is worth it because we got this flavored pomegranate simple syrup to match our rye for the ultimate holiday old fashioned. You'll notice in the recipe that I like to do this rosemary inclusion once again. So we're at pomegranate demerara or dark simple syrup with a local Minnesota rye that's properly aged and mature. And hopefully some of you've got maybe some Minnesota pure ice or a large ice cube mold in your fridge, which is beautiful to use in your low ball glass as you make this. And the only other thing involved would be classic cocktail bitters. Now, an old fashioned can use any base spirit in the world. You can make this with gin, mezcal, dark rum, anything you want, because an old fashioned is just this: 2 ounces spirit, 1/4 ounce sugar, couple dashes of bitters, water, and serve. Your water comes from the dilution process. Okay, so let's build that. Let's be chatty. I mean, anybody who's got any questions as we make this, I can talk and mix along the way. Tell me some feedback, anything you want. But first, my last little non-listed nerdy bar step above type of scenario here is if I had to grade out the holy trinity of bitters, things that will not go bad, that are shelf stable to have at your home bar and that are not that expensive, these are the 3. And I'm going to deviate from tonight's recipe just a touch and add 1 dash of all 3 of these. Number 1 is Simon Bolivar's from the early 1800s, Angostura aromatic bitters. These are the kingpin. If you have this and nothing else, this is what you truly, really need, Angostura bitters. I also like orange bitters. Now, I've got Angostura's orange bitters because I really like them. Some other brands to consider, because these are hard to come by. Regan's, and Feed Brothers for orange bitters. And then lastly, heralding down, originating in New Orleans, this is Peychaud's Apothecary red bitters that are utilized primarily for Sazeracs. You can see this beautiful kind of red character. It was prescribed for digestive issues, cholera, diarrhea, and the like. Super, super appetizing, I know. But apothecarians translated into the bar scene in a beautiful, seamless fashion. And the Peychaud's Apothecary meeting and getting to be buddy-buddy with the Sazerac Hotel, which produced Sazerac whiskey as a parent company, got together and made this Sazerac cocktail. It's all historical, guys. It all makes sense. So what I'm going to do is start with the lowest volume of addition. And instead of, like I say in the recipe on the ensuing page from the Boulevardier, instead of 2 ounces of J. Carver, 1/4 ounce of pomegranate syrup, 3 to 5 dashes of Angostura, I'm going to do 1 dash of Peychaud bitters. By the way, that's how you do a dash. You don't know what a dash is if you're like, oh, is it a drip? Is it a Do your dashes the same time every time so it's reproducible. Let's do a dash. Boom, that's a dash. Got it? It's a forceful downward motion. And I'm going to do 1 orange, 1 Peychaud, and for the most bitter character of the 3, I'm going to do 2 of these. 1, 2. Boom. That's our bitter regimen in this little twist. Then we're going to do our next most voluminous option, which is this dark, dense, beautifully flavored pomegranate simple syrup. Only 3/4 ounce. The Wisconsinites among us, they're not going to get this. They're like, what? What happened to that muddled cherry and all that pile of sugar and all those orange slices I'm supposed to have in there with 7-Up on top? Well, that's a deviation from the original pre-prohibition recipe. We're doing it right here. Okay. Then 2 ounces J. Carver straight rye. Get a little more of that bite. Still retain the bourbon-like caramel. And now we're adding ice and we're stirring. Does anybody have a preferred brand or style of bitters that you have used at home before with good success? Sam, I'm going to call you out, man. Do you have any bitters at home on your shelf? You ever gotten any as a gift that are just sitting there you're waiting to use? What do you got at home, man?
I generally use the bitterness that's in my soul, but I do have something. I got it's like a mass manufacturer, something from the world market sort of bitter blend. It's not fantastic and it tastes kind of chemically.
Yeah, sometimes it's they can be poorly done. Sometimes they can be well done.
Yeah.
If you've got a bottle of Amaro or a bitter liqueur of some sort at home, just a wee couple, milliliter of that dripped in can act as your bittering agent as well.
Oh, nice.
Feed Brothers Black Walnut, I can barely see the bottom comment there, is absolutely astounding. If you've got that at home, put a drop or 2 in here. That should make it really, really nice. Absolutely. So now we've got dilution.
I've got a question for you because I've got a bunch of the Bitter Cube bitters.
Yep.
And I've pretty much just been using them for salad dressings and in my smoothies in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't used them in drinks.
So Bitter Cube has a few that I really like. They're very well respected and they've become a national brand. But although they're founded originally over in Madison and with a guy from Minnesota, so it's cool to support them. Their ownership still is Upper Midwestern, and they are very well reputed across the board. What they are known as for doing some of the best work in is their Jamaican series. They've got a Jamaican number 2, number 3.
Yep.
Those had a Caribbean aspect that is just kind of an elusive, private medley of certain things that I've never been able to reproduce. So I definitely think that adding some flair to a drink with those is a very cool, very interesting. I also like they've got a cherry cherry bark bitters that is really good in a drink like this. We don't need it here because we've already got the pomegranate simple syrup, by the way. I'm pouring here. Never worry about any strong drinks. Never worry about waiting too long to pour because you need as much dilution as you can. Look at that in there with that globe in there. And if it was Minnesota Pure Ice, not my shitty freezer Egan water cubes, that would look even better. But yeah, Lynn, if you want to ever, email me and say, Joel, this is what I got. Like, how do I use it? I'll hit you up with a couple recipes, okay?
The bitter
Thank you.
in daiquiris is
Oh, absolutely. I'm with you there. I think that was Mr. Colbeck's sighting. Was that right, Josh? Did I hear you?
Yep, that was me.
Awesome. Yeah, I absolutely love it. Love it. Love it. Daiquiris is a great way to utilize bitter cube bitters. All right. And then I wanted to have a little seasonal aromatic to pair with this pomegranate. It's pomegranate and rosemary, pomegranate and thyme, cranberry and rosemary, cranberry and thyme. These are beautiful marriages of fruit and savory herb that I can recommend, highly and with confidence. So I'm actually not going to smack the shit out of this one. I'm just going to kind of brush it over my hand, kind of give it some liveliness. I'm going to slide it alongside in my ice cube so it's barely peeking out, poking over. And then I'm going to grab my orange. It's very nice. My neighbors are part of this. Hey, Rob and Danielle, they've got a blood orange that I've dropped off to them. So make sure you guys get a nice swath of that blood orange peel, which is just packed with flavors there. And make sure you don't want to dig in too much to get too thick of the white pith. I actually probably got a little too much there. You want to keep it as thin as possible. If you're feeling super fancy and you need to impress a date or an in-law or whatever, you can always shore this up a little bit by giving it like a parallelogram type of scenario where you're cutting on the bias and you've got this, wow, what the heck is this guy doing? He's such a mixologist. What is this fancy drink I'm having? And then you express it, give it another twist, give it that residual oils on the exterior of the glass. Maybe you want to just notch it up and you do a slit down the center, turn it into a boat that you kind of just lodge on the side because you're into making fancy things. See that, huh? Well, none of that's necessary, okay? Just do whatever you can, do whatever you're into. And this is a perennial family favorite recipe of my wife and my own. And I want to finish with this by saying cheers to you all. I'm so thankful that you all participated, supported Solovino, have been with me on these cocktail classes throughout. I'm thankful to Sue. I'm thankful to Chuck and Sean at Solovino. I'm thankful to my company that I work for by day, which is the Wine Company of Minnesota, for providing me this amazing array of a diverse palette to paint with in terms of spirits and wine. And so let's raise a glass together. Thank you all. This
Cheers.
will be and shared with you all. If you wish, just email Sue and or email myself. And we're doing another one in January. It's going to be the same, but if you want to do a different set of drinks alongside, maybe some different version of information might spill forth. And if you want to join, I'd be happy to cue you in on that. Cheers to you all. Salute. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and
So
Happy
much
New
for
Year to you.
sharing
Thank
all
you,
the fun
Joel.
with us.
Thanks so much. This was awesome. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas all.
Now I'm going to go make a bee's knees, Joel.
Mm-hmm. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Joel. Good
Bye.
job.
Thanks. Love you guys. Merry Christmas. See you later.